Sharing. What the heck is this? This is new? How did I turn that off? Oh, CC. Turn off the CC. Okay, so that's pretty much site selection in a nutshell. Now let's try to talk a little bit more about urban planning over here. So I have um, did a quick research over here. Didn't have time to put them into slides, but there are like several new developments in what do you call this? Urban planning and urban development theory and sort of practice. So the biggest one I think that we should know about is the 15-minute city. So this concept I think is the most recent one. Wait, let me see. Let me click on the thing. There we go. So the idea is we should be designing cities not from the sort of the top looking down, but from the ground up. And this idea of 15-minute cities is all about measuring the amount of time that people can get to their homes, to like the different activities within the city. So 5-minute walk, 15-minute walk, 5-minute bike ride, 15-minute electrical vehicle or bike ride. And then if you notice, there is no private car on this list. So it's all about human-powered transportation, walking, cycling, and I think electric vehicle is sort of like a new trend today because that's coming out in developed countries like electric scooters, electric cycles. The key thing here is speed. So let me convert this. I forgot to convert 3 miles per hour to kilometers per hour. So 3 miles per hour is about 4 kph, kilometers per hour, and then so on and so forth. So 6 miles per hour is about 10 kilometers per hour. Okay, over here. So that's 3, 12, 20, and 12 again. So 20 is the fastest. Let's see, 20 miles per hour. Actually about like 30 kilometers. Okay, around 30 kilometers. So that's important because as we discussed last sem, 30 kilometers is sort of the threshold for like any moving vehicle to hit a person without any helmet or any protective gear. You can be going at 30 kilometers per hour and you hit someone, both of you should be fine. If you're on a bike or if like, I think nobody runs at 30 kilometers per hour. And even if you're in a vehicle, if you're going at 30 kilometers per hour, if you hit someone, there should only be minor injuries. So if you go beyond 30 kilometers per hour, more likely someone will break an arm, break some ribs. And if you go like 60 or 50, you're definitely killing someone when you hit them with your car. So that's the idea here. So it's safer, promotes like healthy living, and it should be better for businesses overall. Again, as we talked about earlier, the urban economics of it all is that if there are closer, what they call this, building developments, whether it be commercial, institutional, residential, everyone benefits from this clustering of similar uses. So if it's commercial areas, more people go there, more people spend their money, more people are serviced. Everyone, it's a win-win situation. And the only reason why urban sprawl happened is because people were becoming sort of overestimating the benefits of the car. And now we realize almost 50 years later that creating cities based on private vehicle travel is very, very bad because you create a lot of a lot of like unused space, underutilized space, a lot of what do you call this? Zigzag roads that don't really go anywhere, dead end roads, and of course traffic congestion. And because the cars are in the road for so long, you have like CO2 emissions are also increasing, etc., etc. So it's just not sustainable, and it's a waste of the limited resources that we have, especially in a place like Cebu province. Let me turn off this thing. How do I turn off this thing? There we go, like that. Okay, moving on. Okay, so this is a very great article. This just got published like probably like yesterday. So what are the different sort of activities within the different sort of modes of travel. So 15-minute walk about 3/4 miles. So let me see, 3/4 uh, fourth mile to kilometer. I converted this earlier. About 1.2 kilometers. Let's see here. So 5-minute radius is about one fourth a mile, or like zero point 0.4 kilometers, a half a kilometer. And then 15 minutes is like one full kilometer, and etc. etc. And also they have a very interesting thing here, is that within a 5-minute what do you call this walk, you can fit about 1,000 dwelling units. 5-minute dwelling units equal to 1,000 at 8 acres. I think that's 8 acres. So there's a lot of things that we need to convert. Everything here is in what do you call this, English units, because it's an American article. But notice that the 5-minute population will fit about let's see, 2,600 or at 2.6 sort of 2.6 people per household. And then a 15-minute walk would fit about a 23,000 what do you call this, population area. So let's do that quick estimate very quickly. Quick estimate very quickly. So let's see here. Let's say Barangay Kiyot. Let's see here. Zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. Does that fit? Let's see here. So 0.76 square kilometers. Let's see here. Let me get a square root calculator here. Square root calculator. Calculator. 0. Square root of 0.76. 0.76. It's about 0.87 kilometers. Let's see here. 0.87 kilometers, 2 miles. About half a mile. Let's see if that aligns over here. So 5-minute is about one-fourth a mile, so less than half. About 2,600 people. Let's see, go back to Barangay Kiyot. Barangay Kiyot has 27,000 people. So definitely, that's one of the big problems in like barangays and cities in the Philippines, that our population numbers are very, very high, and we live in very, very small areas. But instead of using more walking and cycling, we actually rely more on the cars. And as we all know, let's see here, let me do a quick drawing here. If you're all using cars and there's like 20,000 of us in one area, about zero point 0.8, so let's say this is the city limit, and let's say this is the grid. If we have a grid, let's say this is 0 0.8 kilometers. If everyone here is like, if the population is about 20,000 people, let's say only half have cars. That's about half have cars. That's still 10,000 cars. And then on a stretch of like 0 0.8 kilometer road, how many cars can you fit? 0 0.8 kilometer road. The dimension of a car, let's say a car that looks like this. You have your windshields there. The car is about, let's say, 2 meters long by about like 1.5 meters wide. So let's say one lane road, or usually in the Philippines, we have 2-lane roads. And you have cars over here, cars over here, cars over here. And everyone goes to work at around 8 a.m. I think some people leave even earlier, like to get to a place at 8 a.m. because of the traffic, they have to leave at like what, 6 a.m. And that creates a morning rush hour. But let's say you're from Barangay Kiyot, and then half of you have cars, and you're leaving Barangay Kiyot going to the city center. How much road space would you take? So very easily, if sort of average car is 2 meters long, but you only have 0 0.8 kilometers, let's just convert that to meters. Oops. Let's convert that to meters. Times 1,000. So 1, 2, 3, you have 800 meters over here. That's 2 times 10,000 cars. So 20,000 meters. So that's only, I guess you can tell where I'm going here. So you have, let's see. Oh, wait, I can do this math easily. For some reason, I can't. 20,000 minus 800. So you have a surplus of, you need 19,200 meters of road to accommodate that number of people. So if you live somewhere here, let's say this is like a very simplified version of Barangay Kiyot, and then your house is here, and you need to get to the city, which is several kilometers away, and then half of you leave the house at the same time, all the roads will be filled no matter where you're living, whether you live here or whether you live here at the border of Barangay Kiyot, the roads will be filled because there's like 19,000 like 19 kilometers of road that Barangay Kiyot needs to accommodate the 10,000 cars if half of the people in this barangay have cars, something like that. Anyway, that's just a quick explanation of why cars are no longer shouldn't be the thing that everyone or urban planners should be designing for. That's why the 15-minute city is like slowly becoming adopted all over the world. Because if you have a bike, you say you have still 20,000 people. Let's say instead of 10,000 of them have cars, what if 10,000 of them have bikes? So how big is a bike? A bike is about, let's say, 1.5, but then it's only how many point 0 mm thickness, let's say about 0.03 meters. In the same space of one car you can fit probably, let's say, 1.5 divided by zero point zero 0.05 lang. You can fit 30 bikes, 30 bikes in the same space of uh, one car. So in the same amount of road, let's say you have like 800 meters of road, you can fit 30 more bicycles. So instead of like 10,000 cars, you can have times 30. Correct me if I'm wrong. I might be like going a little bit overboard with the math. You can fit 30,000 bikes. And that's, let's say, I just averaging here, that's more than the people living in that area. um, with the same amount of roads. So it's just basic math, if I'm doing it right. Let me check. So one car, 30 bikes, 10,000 cars, so times 30, 30,000 bikes, and then there's only 20,000 people in a place like Barangay Kiyot. So instead of like a line of cars, you can have a line of bikes and they're all moving. But again, the trade-off here is travel time. So if you live in Barangay Kiyot, let's go back to Barangay Kiyot over here. Where's Barangay Kiyot? Let me highlight Barangay Kiyot. 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 If you live in Barangay Kiyot, but you work in, let's say, the Colon area, if you work here, measure distance. So something like that. You follow this road, something like that. So you're basically traveling 5 kilometers. That's a long way to travel for the bike. So over here in the 15-minute city, the most they measure for is 15 minutes cycling ride, because that's the amount of like cycling that would be convenient for almost everyone, everywhere in the world, so that what they call this, they can make sure that people bike to wherever they need to go. So you can't have what they call this. This is where the nuance comes in. You can't just have everyone switch to bikes, because there really is the physical impossibility of driving or like cycling 5 kilometers in 15 minutes. So that's not feasible. So let's say 3 miles here. So 3 miles, 2 kilometers. That's about 4 kilometers. Oh, that's actually close to 5 kilometers. It's 4.8 actually. Oh, I'm actually surprised. And then if you're going up here, you go down there, it should be doable actually. But the issue here again is the infrastructure in place? Is the road quality suitable for people who want to cycle, etc., etc.? So this is something that planners, architects, sociologists, health professionals, etc., etc., are thinking about in Western cities. And then now that I have these numbers over here, I didn't realize this. Cebu City is actually very cyclable or very good for cycling. The only issue now is because the middle to upper class don't want to give up their private vehicles because they're used to it. Again, we go back to behavior and culture. Also, I think another thing here would be weather. People don't want to cycle for 15 minutes because they don't want to get sweaty, etc., etc., all that stuff. So we probably want to reduce our travel time specifically in the Philippines from 15 minutes to maybe 10 minutes or 7 minutes so that people don't get sweaty and it's still comfortable. That's another thing that determines this 15-minute radius, this walking, cycling, or electronic vehicle, or even like car 15-minute radius. It's really comfort and the behavior of the people. And going down here. So these are like scaled up to like so you can they can use the same drawing, but in actual scale, like actual miles or meters, this is what it looks like. The 5 minute walk going at around let's see here, three-fourth a mile. So three-fourth a mile again is about three-fourth a mile, 1.2 kilometers. Where's that? 1.2 kilometers, and over here is probably like 3 kilometers for like a 5 minute bike. And then over here, 15-minute bike is about 3 miles. So 3 miles is about 4.8 kilometers. So let's just say 5 kilometers. But probably in the Philippines, because of our climate and our our like Filipino culture and behavior, we probably need to reduce it like from 5 miles to like let's say, or like from 3 miles to let's say like 2.5. So maybe from 5 kilometers to maybe 2.5 kilometers instead. So this needs to be adjusted and contextualized for wherever you are. But for American countries, they've settled on this, like 5 miles. Let's see, 5 miles is about 8 kilometers. And this like 5 mile mark, they're already using electric vehicles. Okay. So what are the factors that planners and designers need to consider when thinking about these things? So let me turn on my highlighter tool here. I highlighted the different places where I need to discuss. So that's a general concept while it's loading. Making cycling more attractive by making it comfortable and giving them a destination. Like if you're living from home, what do you need? You need food. So it should be within a 15-minute cycling, or maybe in the Philippines, 7-minute cycling radius. There should be a place where you can buy food. You can like a small grocery store, etc. So where do you go? Where are my highlights at? Okay, down here. So the three sort of what they call shed levels or radius areas are the 5 minute walk shed, a quarter mile, which is about 0.4 kilometers, from center to edge, indicating the individual neighborhood. Oh, excuse me. Each quarter mile shed or 0.4 kilometer shed must have ordinary daily needs, a range of housing types, so not just like single detached, but also townhouses, apartments, and a center, generally a public square or a main street with minimal mixed use. Businesses at least are located in the neighborhood, and the population may provisionally be calculated at 2,600 people. So that's at the 5 minute walk shed. The shed is basically the radius. In the 15-minute walk radius, three-quarters of a mile or 1.2 kilometers from center to edge is the maximum distance that most people are going to walk. Within this shed should be located a full mix of uses, including a grocery store, pharmacy, general merchandise, and public schools. So these are where your building types come in. Larger parks that serve multiple neighborhoods will be found here, in addition to larger employers, but not necessarily the region's biggest. The 15-minute walk shed provides access to regional transit. We don't have that in the Philippines. At least one station. This shed is similar in size to a 5-minute bicycle shed, So they're already making that connection that 15-minute walk more or less corresponds to a 5-minute bike ride, at least in North American countries. So we need to contextualize these numbers to Philippine numbers. And that could, just doing that could be good enough for a thesis as well. And the bicycling can be used to transport purchased goods. This shed provides for weekly and daily needs. The population is approximately 23,000. Notice that's 10 times the number of people compared to the 5-minute walk shed or radius. So about 2,000 in the first shed and then 20,000 in the next shed. And the final shed, the 15-minute cycling ride, basically the largest that a human-powered vehicle like cycling can accommodate. So within this shed or radius contains the major cultural, medical, and higher education facilities. So that includes your museums, hospitals, and universities. Regional parks and major employers can be found here. Access to intercity transit may be available, so like transportation terminals. This shed provides access to special needs. The total extent of the 15-minute city is therefore defined by the 3-mile radius or 8-kilometer radius of the 15-minute bike ride. The population may be calculated at 350,000 people. So notice the people service is like increasing exponentially. So this is really the thrust here. You can serve more people, you can provide more services, you can like remove cars from roads and like make a city healthier and like so the only people who are left using cars are those who need to use them. So they can't, their work area is not within a 15-minute cycling radius or like an 8-kilometer radius, so they have to use the car. But imagine taking 350 cars off the road, 350,000 cars off the road. That's a saving of, let's see here, how much do we get calculate cars at? 2 meters. So 2 meters times, let's say 300,000. That's 600 meters of road that you're saving, or divided by 1,000. 600 kilometers of road space that you're removing, like 600 meters worth of kanang cars that are removing from the road. So that's definitely going to be a positive impact in traffic congestion. But the catch here is it's not an architectural problem, it's more of an urban design problem. And the thing is, you need to provide the services, the buildings, and the infrastructure to allow these people to even consider cycling and walking in the first place. The reason why in Cebu province and Cebu city specifically, everyone needs to use the car is because there is no mixed use, and there is no sort of in between commercial areas happening in like let's say from Barangay Kiyot all the way to Ayala. Although luckily, I think just based on Filipino sensibilities, we have these small sort of sari-sari stores, something like this, but they don't cater to the daily needs of everyone. Like if you go to this store, you might be able to buy some rice, but it's not going to be the rice that you want. You can't do laundry here. They don't have laundry, but maybe you could just do your laundry in your own house. And you can't work here. If you're a college degree graduate, bachelor graduate, postgrad, you're not working here. So definitely you have to work somewhere closer to the Ayala Center, IT Park, SM maybe as a general head, or like if you're a doctor, you have to work near Fuente Osmeña. So that's several kilometers away. So again, it's because Cebu City has like sort of found itself over relying on the car that our development has turned out like this. So let's look at other cities. Let's say municipality of Liloan, which has like a lot of awards lately. Liloan, Cebu. Let's analyze the pattern of their development. Let's turn on the roads. Let's see, turn on traffic. Traffic. So Liloan doing a lot better than Cebu, mostly because they haven't reached that like the same number of population as in Cebu. So the key thing here for places that don't have what they call this, I guess what some of you called overcrowding or a large amount of population, is to manage the land that's already here. So we can identify like certain growth areas. For example, just turning off the map here. Okay, that's not really helpful. Just looking at the roads over here. So this is a high residential zone. Not really high, maybe mid. mid-class residential zone. So how do you improve this, like from an urban planning standpoint? So in this sort of cluster of houses, you need to provide probably a new mall and maybe a new school, and maybe once that is in place, um, you can start. The government should be starting like buying off these. This is just like a general advice. One person can't make all the decisions. This is why urban sprawl happened in the first place, because only one person was deciding. But ideally, in this kind of like what do you call this situation, where there's a lot of houses and not other uses, you could put like commercial zones or what do you call this institutional zones. That's why we learned about the different zoning ordinances and the classes in the Philippines, like zoning classifications. And then once you have like new commercial areas here and new what do you call this institutional areas, you might want to include or upgrade the existing residential area. So we're talking apartments, townhouses, no longer the single detached zone. Because what happens when you include new commercial areas, as all of you have seen, once a new mall gets in place, a lot of people go there. Um, New houses sort of like build around the malls. We can see that in Ayala over here. So back in the 90s, Ayala Center was very empty. And then I would likely guess that these sort of low cost housing over here was not as full as it is today. So what do you call this? Sorry, my voice. That's why Ayala Center is also building new apartments. But then between the new apartments, which are like targeted to middle to high class, there's a big gap between the price sort of range of low cost housing here and the high cost housing over here. So there's still some uh, politics to be done, community engagement. People and what do you call it? People living here need to be talked to or engaged by the government. And Ayala also needs to work together with the government to create some sort of like middle income housing, so that maybe they can like buy off land here, convert some of these low density houses into like cheaper medium cost houses. So people can actually live in these residential spaces, not just the super elite, but also those who are in the lower income bracket. So that's the sort of equity issue, social issue that the Philippines need to be, or like Cebu City specifically, needs to address. And it's trying to, but hopefully we can do better. But I guess we can always do better. Some other things that I want to highlight over here, or I have highlighted, is some of the problems or the critiques of the 15-minute city. So the street network, very likely all over the world, street networks will have interruptions and places of discontinuity. So meaning what they call pedestrian shadows, pockets of lower walkability will mar the pedestrian experience. So how do you get people to switch to walking and cycling in the first place? You make the experience comfortable and attractive, but the infrastructure most of the time isn't there yet. In the Philippines specifically, and also Cebu City, we have a lack of like uniform sidewalks and just the behavior of people prioritizing cars and sort of demeaning or kanang putting down pedestrians, where like if an accident happens, if a pedestrian gets hit by a car, it's the pedestrian's fault and not the car's fault, stuff like that. So also other things here. How far a person can get in 15 minutes using transit depends on too many variables to provide the discipline of a shed. So this highlights that some of the cities in America also include 15-minute transit, meaning what they call this bus rides. So over here, two kinds of stations may be incorporated into the 15-minute city: community transit stops, which are primarily human-powered, access through human-powered mobility, and commuter transit stops, which are accessed by car. So they're talking about train stations or bus stations. So they divided it by kanang, can we access it through human power, like walking and cycling, or can we only access it by car? So this is something that needs to be considered. In the Philippines, I think everything is by car. So number one, we just need to put sort of like a middle what they call this transition mode, or now, or even just have the infrastructure for walking and cycling, so that it will be a viable mode of transportation. Another thing here is the quality of the walk. The 15-minute city is not just defined by the ability to walk or bike for 15 minutes, but also the quality of the pedestrian experience. What architect Steve Mozon refers to as the walk appeal. So you need to make it comfortable, you need to make it attractive and safe. So everything else like comes together from that. So it's already like 5:44. I can go on for a little bit. So I just want to highlight these notes here, that all of the diagrams are clean circles with like concentric arrows, but in real life, this isn't the case. This is just a simplified diagram. In real life, travel time is not like a straight line. It's usually a bunch of like curves and detours. So let me open a map here. Let's say I want to go to Ayala, but the route I need to take is definitely not a straight line. So if I need to go here, let's see, measure distance. So if I'm going from San Carlos, well, I guess if I live in close to San Carlos, I'll be living like, it'll be more or less a straight line. But let's say if I live in one of these residential areas like here, so there's a U-turn over here, and then generally a straight-ish line. But if let's say if you live, let me clear measurement over here. Let's say if you live here, and one of my sort of exercises was to create a cycling route from this area over here. So the cycling route is definitely not a straight line, and you need to go through several obstacles to even get to the entrance of Ayala Terraces. So one of those like obstacles are the intersection. So this one is fairly high speed, like based on my experience, about like 40 to 60 kilometers per hour. If there are no cars, if there are cars, it slows down to like 20 to 10 kilometers per hour. And there are 1, 2, 3 intersections, which would be hazard points for anyone on a bicycle. And then there's the big obstacle of like underneath the what they call this flyover in this like Ayala area. If you're driving in this area, it's very hectic. People tend to slow down, but some people just go like 30, 40 kilometers, just like drives, breezes through this area. And that creates a danger for cyclists and also negatively impacts the cycling experience. So those are the 4 major obstacles here. And finally, when you get here, it should be a lot more safer in the sort of central business district of Ayala, because they actually provided now cycling paths. So that's basically, you can read more on this article. I can send you guys a link. So that's basically the idea of the 15-minute city. I think the latest in a long line of like smart growth like principles. The author of this article, by the way, is Andres Duani, sort of like the head and founder of a movement called the New Urbanism movement. So let me just open that here. New Urbanism over here. And then also, very quickly, I like to talk about transit-oriented development. So let me click on that link, click on this link, close this, close this. So new urbanism basically is a happened around like mid 2000s, is an approach based on the principles of how cities and towns had been built for the last several centuries. Walkable blocks and streets, housing, shopping in close proximity, and accessible public space. So sort of shifting the idea from people and vehicles to like people just walking and like creating a community, basically seeing your neighbors, stuff like that, focusing on the human element of cities. So not just the buildings and the vehicles, but actually the people who live inside them. So new urbanists want to see human scale neighborhoods return. And the reason why they left in the first place, again, is because of the popularity of the car. Older cities like, as we mentioned before, London, Rome, etc., were built on the primary mode of transportation being walking, because back in ancient times there was no cars, so the city was designed around walking and carriages. I think carriages were only for the super rich, like emperors, kings, etc. New urbanists make placemaking and public space a high priority. So it's all about creating meaningful space. So it's not just an empty wall. There's actually like small markets, kiosks, So those things that we consider sort of dirty, the small markets in the corners of our streets, um, we shouldn't think of them as bad things. In fact, we should try on improving them because these are the things that create quote unquote places, basically social spaces that have meaning to a community. They might not mean as much to you for someone who's on a car, but for those who can't afford afford cars, this will be like a good space to like buy food, get their daily needs, etc., etc. New urbanism is pragmatic, so it's about rational design. So new urbanists work with and include production builders, smart developers, traffic engineers, etc., etc. Focus on design, which is critical to the function of communities, is holistic, reclaiming underutilized and neglected places. So talking about those spaces in cities that are sort of dangerous. Usually, those are the spaces that have nobody there, dark alleyways, empty streets. Those are usually the kinds of spaces where you get tourists or whatever. And then finally, transit-oriented development. I think this came out around the same time as well, a bit earlier, maybe 1990s or even 1980s. So the goal here is to create integrated urban spaces designed to bring people in, again, highlighting number one, people, activities, buildings, and other public space together with easy walking and cycling connection between them and near excellent transit services to the rest of the city. So again, it's not just the Netherlands, it's not just the European countries, but also American cities and even cities like Australia, New Zealand, Singapore in Asia have like shifted to these like walking oriented or people oriented urban development. So again, highlighting walk, high quality, unobstructed pedestrian footpaths, provide basic mobility for all, furniture, landscaping elements, and active building edges transform walkways into vibrant public spaces. So I just want to highlight what are active building edges, meaning at your ground floor level of your buildings for architects, you need to provide space for sitting, space for interaction, usually in the form of like retail space. That's the most basic because people can come in to buy food or whatever they need, water, whatever you can find in a small retail space. Cycle. So hopefully architects will include what they call this. Like I have a meeting in like 10 minutes. Include cycling. What they call this? Cycling parking, bicycle parks, something like that. Connection. So everything has to be integrated, or you can't have like just one small route of cycling and then interrupted by a vehicle sort of excuse me private vehicle parking or private vehicle intersection. Eventually, everything has to be connected, but we can start small. Public transportation also needs to be improved, has to be frequent, fast, reliable, and also safe. Shifting away from motor vehicles. And once you do that, you also need, at the same time of shifting away from motor vehicles, you need to densify, increase densities. So this is not just about single use, it's about mixed use, which is highlighted here. Compact, similar to the buildings, or not buildings, the urban structure that was constructed during the ancient times before cars. So this is the reason why probably the most beautiful cities today are still the older cities, the Renaissance cities, the ancient cities, is because back then, uh, thousands of years ago, they're really designing for people because they had no choice. But now, in the industrial age, we had the choice of choosing vehicles and we thought it would be the way of the future. Now, 50, 70 years later, we realize it's an unsustainable mode of like urban growth. So now we have to backtrack. So basically, hopefully, you learn like what you get from this course is that cities need to be designed around people, and in the same way, architecture needs to be designed for people. So you're not just looking at the exterior, you're not just looking at like, oh, the form of my building, but you're really thinking about the function of your building. So hopefully you can apply that in your finalizing your senior high school projects, and then you can apply that in our future projects in this whole BS architecture course. And when you graduate, you'll think about the people and not just the buildings or the cars. And with that, that ends our final lecture for this sem. We will have a quiz, like a final exam next Monday, probably. And then I'll stop presenting here, stop recording. Maybe if you have any questions, does anybody have any questions? Seems like nobody has questions. So I'll stop recording here. And then I will see you all on Monday.